The myth we are debunking today is AI just a convenient tool in our hands? The uncomfortable truth is more complicated.
Though I'm a techie and I'm tech in heart and I own the tech pillar, it's business and the case is what is driving it. Tech is more in a supporting role for the business because I usually say you can build the best feature in the world with all the best practices and coding standards, but if no one is using it, it's the worst feature ever built. So you have to build something that people actually want to use.
AI may sit in our hands, on our phones, in our browsers, and insides of our work tools. But every interaction also produces something valuable. Data, behavior, preference, intent, emotion, risk, signals, productivity patterns, and sometimes deeply personal traces of who we are. We think we are using AI, but in many cases, AI is also using us. Not necessarily in some dramatic science fiction way. No evil robot sitting in a dark room stroking a cat because apparently even dystopia has branding standards now. The real issue is quieter, more boring and more administrative, which makes it more dangerous. We accept terms we do not read, we use tools we do not understand, we upload documents we should probably protect. We ask systems questions we would not ask our colleague, managers, doctors, and friends. And then we are surprised that privacy becomes complicated. Today's question is not whether AI is useful. It is. The question is, what are we giving away in exchange? Who is responsible for making sure that AI systems are observable, governed, secure, auditable, and accountable before they become deeply embedded in our lives and organizations? That is why I'm joined by Una Verhoeven today. Una is EVP Technology and Innovation and an expert in AI governance, platform strategy, digital transformation, and global engineering leadership.
Work with AI as humans and AI, and I don't believe that AI is here to replace us. It might be a bit of a controversial opinion. I see AI as an amplifier of what you have. In particular, I'm more than happy to give away to AI all the monotonous tasks that I was doing, and it's actually doing it for me behind the scenes, but at the end, I'm the approver. But I can actually then focus on what matters to actually push things and move things in the right direction.
She has worked across architecture, software delivery, AI strategy, and executive decision-making. In other words, she is not here to give us another LinkedIn-friendly paragraph about unlocking the future. She actually knows what happens under the hood. And that matters because the real AI story is not only about models, prompts, and productivity. It's about governance, privacy, risk, drift, hallucinations, monitoring, security, ownership, and growing power imbalance between the people who build these systems and people who blindly use them.
AI is definitely going to change the world, and there is no question in it. It's more how do we work with it, and what are the plans of ours to do.
So today, we're going to be honest about AI. Not anti-AI, not naively pro-AI, just honest. Because if we want to use AI responsibly, we need because if we want to use AI responsibly, we first need to stop pretending that convenience is free. Hi, Una. Welcome to the show. Great to have you as a guest.
Hi, Amir. Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Hey, we talked about the myth that you want to debunk today, and you said what you would like to address. As a society, we have given away our privacy because AI is available to us in our hands. And how may we unknowingly have accepted to become a product? But before we dive into things like governance, regulation, or risk, a step to make this more urgent. What made this topic attractive for you to talk about it today? Why is it important?
Well, in particular, if we see how many tools are out there and how many unicorns, it's a step from the innovation in the right direction. But I also think that there is a certain level of education that needs to be done as to what happens behind the scenes. And I can see it on day-to-day basis, both in personal and professional life. And from the professional point, this is something that we're tackling and I'm tackling very seriously. But I think because it's something that has become available in our hands, we treat it differently. we're not aware of actually what happens until it hits us. And I usually like to compare the AI a bit with what happened with the GDPR, especially when you're in IT, you know what's happening behind the scenes. Yeah, and I know that EU gets sometimes a bad rap with the amount of regulations that they have, but one thing that I think was really good about it was that it brought the awareness of something that many of us knew, but it actually came to the surface. And I don't know, for some reason, it seems that we have forgotten a bit as to what happened in the past, and that AI is basically a massive amplifier. And this is the reason why, this is something that I'm looking currently very seriously. But the educational part of what is happening behind the scenes is something that feels missing. And because it's available in our hands, we kind of mentally treat it differently. Because you're not speaking with a sales rep. Nobody's trying to sell you anything is in person that you need to sign up, etc. It feels like talking to a human, talking to your peer. And I think that this is the reason why certain guardrails somehow got lowered, so to say.
The convenience hit us.
Yeah, it is a convenience, and it is a very convenient tool and a platform that you can use, and it solves many things. But, sometimes convenience comes with a price.
And is this fundamentally different from the social media era, or is AI simply the next stage of the same business model?
I think it's the next stage, and I wouldn't call it the same business model. I mean, yes, in the terms of the collecting the data and offering everything that we can. I think it's also a bit of a good parallel if you look from the social media and the ads that are being served, because that's, at least from what I read, I'm not an expert on it, one of the main profit drivers for them. And then the question becomes, what happens when ads actually come into these platforms? Because there are talks that ads will come into the apps. When will that happen, and will it happen for sure? Only time will tell. But I think the big difference between the social media and the AI, we share far more. So, for example, on social media, yes, you would be sharing your location, your pictures. There is a metadata behind it that is being shared that can be used. But with AI, we plan our trips. Some people share their bank statements, for example, to use it for the investments. So there's far more data that is being shared than what you normally have on social media.
And do people even understand what they're giving away with usage of AI tools? Or is this simple the same parallel that you draw with GDPR before we did not understand what we were giving away?
I don't think they do. I think the majority doesn't realize what it's giving away. Otherwise, I think they would be a bit more cautious as to how it's used. And there is a big difference whether you're using the public URLs or you have actually signed up. Is model being trained on the things that you're sharing? So there are many caveats, and especially where does data live? Is it going to, for example, I'm based in the Netherlands. Is the data going to stay in the Netherlands, or is it going to go to the US? So that also we're seeing, in particular in this year, that has quite an effect on the business.
Yeah, so GDPR forced organization to think about the personal data, consent, lawful basic, purpose limitation, retention. But AI seems to make all of this much more difficult because it not only stores system data, but they classify, predict, generate, recommend, act even on your behavior. So is GDPR enough for this era? I mean, next to AI Act and
No,
all.
I don't think it's not. And there is for example, European AI Act, which is going to come. It's a step in the right direction. And as I mentioned, I know that we get quite a bad rap with all the regulations, etc., that we're killing innovation. But there has to be some kind of guardrails, certain fundamentals that people actually get educated to understand what is happening behind the scenes. And only time will tell. I think it's too difficult to predict, but GDPR alone is simply not enough. And again, because of the amount of data that is being shared and how the data can be used. But as I mentioned, only time will tell. No, nobody can predict the future because, and that's also one big difference, I would say, if you look when the GDPR came out, what was it, 2018, compared to the AI now. it's so much faster. I think this is the first time that we as humans cannot compete with the technology because the speed of innovation is simply too quick. If you look AI back in December, and if you look at it today, completely different beast.
Um, this is yesterday I gave a keynote about this. I compared the steam machine with the coming of electricity, and that organization are now actually defined for a steam engine, and now you get an electric engine. I said the organization are actually not equipped, and their processes are not equipped to handle this um, technology. And actually, the processes are also not meant for it. You have to redesign your organizations. Do you think that the organization at this point are looking at it like this? Like, okay, we need to redefine everything because this is something so new. We really have to have a deeper look into redefining who we are, what we're doing, and how we're doing it.
I think you're absolutely spot on. This is happening everywhere. We're also doing it internally and also for the clients. And you have organizations also who are not using the AI, which are kind of waiting for everything to settle, kind of learn from other people's mistakes. But there is always the so-called fear of missing out. You don't want to be the last. You want to be on the top of the competition. But there are many things that are being deployed from the AI governance perspective. What tools are you using? And there's entire regulation how you purchase the tools, for what purpose are you using those tools, how are you using the prompting, are you uploading the data that shouldn't be there, are you obfuscating the data, how do you handle with the hallucinations in particular. So let's take, for example, you train, and there's so many cases that you can use AI for, but when the AI gives you the answer, how correct is it? Is it a hallucination? Have you actually taken that into consideration? How is the drift being handled, etc.? So it's a not a simple thing as here is the checklist and we're good with it. So I can actually give you a prime example that for example, we're doing at the moment and we're rolling it out within the company. So our developers use Cursor, for example. And it's not enough just, hey, here's a tool, use it, and we expect, the productivity. The world doesn't work that way. Because one thing that we're also seeing at the same time, your token usage gets up, your bills are going up. It's also something that everyone is talking about today. But it's about how you're using it. And this is not to scrutinize people, but to actually understand, does the tool that you have bought actually make sense for the work you do? Because many of them can do many things, but which one is actually moving the needle, as they would say. So it's really understanding how the tool is being used, and there is the entire layer of data and analytics that needs to come behind the scenes. And this is not something that you get out of the box with the dashboards. So you need to understand what your core of the business is, then how it is being used, because I know that everyone is asking about what is the productivity gain? How much did you save? But I think that's also a bit of a simplistic way to look at things, because what you may have saved if your AI has hallucinated and produced a bunch of bugs long term, long term you haven't saved much. You have introduced, as we would call it, spaghetti mess. So you really need to take into consideration the purchasing, the regulations, then how it's being used from the governance perspective, then the output that it gives, and then at the end you can look at the ROI. But I think that this is the area which is mostly uninvested, untapped, so to say, because it's very easy to say, here's a tool and make it work.
So as always, we have the fear of missing out, and then we take decisions which we didn't really thought about fundamentally and how they
Yeah, and
will
then you
impact.
basically need to reverse engineer the things that you have done. So kind of ideal is I mean, there are plenty of templates that are nowadays available. Many companies also went through it, that you can actually lay out the ground fundamentals that you don't repeat the same mistakes. But a lot of work actually goes into it, which is part of the company transformation. But the tooling alone is not enough when we talk about changing the company and the way how we work. And my attitude as well is we work with AI as humans and AI. And I don't believe that AI is here to replace us. it might be a bit of a controversial opinion, I see AI as an amplifier of what you have. So in particular, I'm more than happy to give away to AI all the monotonous tasks that I was doing, and it's actually doing it for me behind the scenes, but at the end, I'm the approver. But I can actually then focus on what matters to actually push things and move things in the right direction. But another thing that we also need to be aware of is I call it the AI fatigue. I know the simplest example I can give is kind of LinkedIn, and I'm not going to lie, I use AI as well. I have even written an extensive post as to how I use AI and how I scrutinize it and all my checklists that it needs to have in order not to hallucinate, to sound more like me. There are, I think, 12 or 13 steps that I'm using just to write a simple post on LinkedIn. But that is the level of the scrutiny that should be applied to everything, in my
I,
view.
I'm in the line with you. I'm very critical of it because I think we as a human species are very prone to delegating our thinking to other people and now to machines. So we would love to have that, but it's just not the fact. You still have to turn on your brain.
But that's actually the key thing, because the critical thinking combined with your experience is what makes the use of the AI better. Without critical thinking, we're not going in the right direction, because any prompt you give, any loop you give, the first response is always a happy flow by default.
Of course, and it will always satisfy your questions. It
Oh,
will.
absolutely. And then when you cross-correct it, you usually get, oh, you're absolutely right. I missed that.
Yeah, and but this is something that people, if you are in the phase of copy pasting, this is what people miss. I do have a question for you because um, I think for you, an expert in IT who has probably grown up and learning the fundamentals from the core, old way. I uh, e- exactly. Um, to the current generation that is actually growing digitally up. We have the first generation of youth that has never experienced the Nokia 3300.
Yeah. Or a
So
dial-up in our case.
or this you know
Yeah.
that old
Yeah, the
phone.
rotary phone.
Yeah, the rotary phone. That's level. But you have if you have the knowledge and you have the expertise, you have superpowers because you can ask the right question, you can actually validate the answers, you you can interact with it, and it makes your work much more efficient and effective because you use the things that are beneficial for you that you would spend any amount of hours that are actually now resolved within minutes, so to say. However, I see two dangers. So I'm really curious how you look at it. The first one is the cognitive depth. And the cognitive depth, if you outsource your thinking to a machine, at a certain point, you won't know what you, pardon, you won't know what you talked about with it. You don't have the tacit knowledge, you don't have the fundamentals, you don't have the expertise. So actually, you delegated your thinking, and that cognitive depth will only grow. Then the second one is um, the technical depth that you produce when you're in IT and you're letting it code for you. I don't think that you will remember in 3 months what it coded for you. So when something goes bad, you will really have an issue. Um, Now, for you as a senior, that's not an issue because you already have the expertise of coding and you know what to do and etc. But if you're a junior and this is your entry point, you don't learn nothing.
Yeah, that's true. I usually say it's a very important topic, and I recently had a conversations with a couple of friends of mine, and I got asked, I think it's a native from a friend of mine, I can't remember, is it 12 or 14 years old, and the question was, he wants to go into to make games. What do I tell him? How do I prepare him for the future? Because the response he got from one of the relatives was, oh, why are you interested in that when AI is going to replace you anyhow? So kind of not a nice thing to say to the kids, kind of crush your dreams by default. And it's a conversation that I have a very young child and my colleagues also have young children, but it's something that continues in the back of our heads because we are the generation who grew up in completely analog era and then worked in digital era. So we have seen a lot of it. Critical thinking is something that no one can take away from you. So as long as you have it, and this is what basically I said, advise and train a person to be critical, to question everything, to be naturally curious, because those things are super important. In the world of IT, I'm just going to simplify it. What is basically a programming? And this is a very, very big simplification. You have a problem or a feature that you need to implement. You do it in a language that the computer understands. You create the happy parts, you create unhappy parts to catch the exceptions, and you split it into smaller steps where you give the instructions. Again, very simplified thing. But if you don't know in your head how to define what those steps are, you're going to have problems. And I remember when I had years ago, when I had a startup and it was with kids, basically. I call them kids because they were so young. I didn't spend so much time in training them how to code. Now you have back then you had Stack Overflow and everything, which in my time you didn't have, it didn't exist. But I spent time to train them how to think. And one of the things that I love to do, especially with the freshers, was write an algorithm to make a coffee. Very simple. Just explain it in your words. How would you make a coffee? And, you have to go through all the checks. Do you have a coffee? Do you have electricity? Do you have water, et cetera, and based on the coffee that you like. But that simple exercise has taught them to check for the edge cases, to check for the null values. It's all about how you think. And yes, with the mobile phones, with the smartphones, now with the AI, everything is accessible to you. You don't need to wait to actually get the response. Like in our time, you have a dial-up, you have a certain amount of hours that are bought for the internet, and it's so precious for you to do the research. And now you can just send it out and the answer is waiting for you. So I think it's also a bit of a balancing to also make sure that children are exposed in the physical world and less in the digital one. And I think, especially after COVID and everything that has happened, we're also seeing the push in that direction. And I can also see it with my child in kindergarten, the way how they do things. But the key thing is it comes from home and it's critical thinking and natural curiosity.
So, in the long run, of course, we have seen all these doom scenarios from the big
Yeah.
CEOs. We're firing 10,000 dead. IT is doomed. This apocalyptic messaging, which I'm sick
Yeah.
of, because you then really don't understand anything about IT if you think that that's that easy. However, there are, of course, people that believe that, I can now use Replit or Lovable, whatever, and vibe code my way into existence. While the technical depth with that is growing, and they don't have a clue what on the backside is happening. For you, it will be much easier. So it gives you superpowers, but to a regular user, he just use natural language to program stuff without really understanding what's going on behind. Um, do you have a concern that at a certain point everything will be vibe coded by the common people, and we will have like spaghetti all over the place with a huge failures, and then coming back to what we started with huge privacy issues and breaches because we haven't even touched the security of artificial intelligence tools. And if you vibe code it, I don't know if the security is on the level you would like to be, especially when you're using personal data.
I think we're already there in terms of the vibe coded things, but there are
Sorry,
several views.
in the in the apocalypse.
Well, in the term, not in terms of the apocalypse. I'm quite pragmatic when it comes to it. I'm not buying it that we're in the apocalyptic era at all. But, there are platforms that are becoming really good and they're investing, that are fully aware of what the risks this entails, and they're producing, let's call them a sandboxes. Again, very simplistic term as to what you can do in order to test things and how to protect you from yourself. But obviously that requires that you actually know that these are the companies that have that, these are the platforms and products. But if you haven't worked in this industry, I think in the long run, this will all filter out itself. Because, I mean, it's not going to be nice. Let's not kid ourselves. There will be data flying around. There will be most likely access to your bank accounts, uh, perhaps even stolen identities. Again, time will tell. I'm not going to, predict the apocalyptic doom scenario, but I think that that will actually cause people to become more aware once they see these things. And then they will start questioning more. Again, I'm drawing a bit of a parallel with the GDPR. It's not one-on-one, but we have seen what has happened and how people now say, okay, you can't actually keep my data for that amount of time. I don't need to sign up for your newsletter in order to register. And, you're not allowed to use my data to sell it to the other organizations and the third parties. So yes, we're going to have an absolute spaghetti mess. But I also, my view is that the companies who do it right are in for the long run. And we're just going to see the filtering out happening behind the scenes.
Yeah. So good. And then maybe we can dive under the hood. So from a normal user perspective and AI tool types of questions, that I think that's quite straightforward. But from a technical and governance perspective, that interaction can create a long data trail. Can you walk us through what may happen behind the scenes when somebody uses an AI tool?
Well, it depends in which context and in which case. So the one that we're in particular looking into is, you mentioned the vibe coding. So for example, when you have agent-to-agent interactions, so the first thing, the most obvious one is the jailbreaking and the prompt injection. So you need to make sure that nobody behind the scene can actually abuse that. And we have seen what happens when you don't have the guardrails. In the US, that actually had the chatbot, but they haven't put any guardrails, so people were abusing and using it for everything, like a free AI tool instead of paying the subscription
Think
to.
it
It's kind of that example what happens. I mean, you actually pay a heavy price, whether it's in your token usage or in the data. What you don't want to do is you don't want to have as a business, your CRM data exposed. So, and one thing that we actually haven't touched is the entire security and the observability to continuously understand what happens under the hood and how you can actually prevent of certain actions to be executed, and to realize that even when you implement all of that, it may not be enough because the models are getting more smarter. You have, as they call them, the good actors and the bad actors. And, the intent is, we always want to think that people have the intent to use it for the best. But you also need to have that different hat on, so to say, and to look at it from a different view, how that data and how everything you do can be abused. So, for example, it was, I think, OpenClaw when it came out. Everyone was installing it, and you could see all the API keys spread across online because, people were just giving the actual keys that they were using to quite unreliable at that moment product or a platform. But, it has moved in a tremendous positive way. But if you're going to do something like that, I mean, I'm not going to lie, I tested it as well. But my test was on my very old Windows laptop that had nothing from my person. It was completely wiped out. And I have a couple of servers and it's used for those type of things, but I'm not going to do it from the experimentation purposes on the laptop that I use or my business laptop. But from the experiment point of view, I think, it showed and opened the doors to many things that we're seeing today. You have the loops for the agents, you have schedulers that you can give. Creating an agent now is very easy, but at the same time, I still believe that you as a human need to be the final approval. So for example, yes, I'm going to have AI plan my vacation trip because we're now traveling through 7 countries. Yeah, doing a big road trip. But I'm not going to allow it to book the hotels for me, because then I need to pass my bank card and I'm still going to check and vet everything that it has done. So yes, it does help tremendously, but you always need to be aware of what you're giving. And I think that is the biggest challenge when it's so commoditized. It's so easy.
It's the availability
Yeah.
is. I mean, you have a data scientist next to you.
Yes.
This is how I see it. 10 years ago, you had data science was the sexiest job in the world. And now it is available to all the people and all the models, and you don't even have to think about which model is used. I mean,
Yeah,
you,
but
you
but at
just
the
ask a
same
question.
time, you need to understand how the clusters are created, how the connections between the data is there, because even if I think data science, especially today, is super important. Exactly because of the hallucination. And how do you determine that the output that has been provided is the correct one? So, for example, if you want to have your own brag, you want to train on your own data, you need to make sure that you don't have a hallucinations. And in particular, what is also super challenging is you get a new model and they come out every 3 months nowadays, if not even quicker. Now you want to test how the newer model performs against the benchmark of your old model. And how does that look? So these are all the things that you need to have in consideration. Otherwise, yeah, not every PR is a good PR.
No, no, no. But actually, quite frankly, the conversation that we are having, I see it not so often. What I see in most cases are people screaming from the roofs that AI is going to change the world in a way we don't understand it. But then they go into how are you going to build an agent and etc. But not really knowing the story behind it or all the checks and balances that you have to have in place, but just implementing some tool somewhere. And this is actually opening a situation of many risks for any given company that is like fearing of missing out and saying, okay, let's do it, and then being very sorry afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, AI is definitely going to change the world, and it already has. There is no question in it. It's more how do we work with it, and what are the plans of ours to do with it. I think kind of one of my views is the reason why we're seeing sometimes such a doomsday messages. It's also about the expectations. You have two sides of the coin. So let's say you have a client who wants something done, and you have a company that needs to produce that. And then you have the expectation, oh, now you have an AI. Like, why do you need that amount of time to do something? Can't AI do that? Because there is a misunderstanding of the groundwork that actually needs to be done. Yeah, I mean, you can delegate more and more as things are progressing, but to fully give everything away, and especially when you have the enterprise type of code repository, yeah, you don't really want it. I mean, I wouldn't do that as to today. You need to split it into smaller chunks. But it also comes from the expectation. And, clients want everything fast. And because it's fast, it should be cheaper. But then you look at the other side of the coin. Has AI actually made things cheap? I would question that because of the token spendage and the usage and everything that we are seeing. And now with the rise of open models, that opens a completely different path in the direction in which we are going to head. And I'm actually quite looking forward to see what Mistral produces. I think they're releasing their models in July, and to get my hands on it, also to test it, to see how it benchmarks against already the known models that have been released. But it's also the expectation that we're seeing as well. Yeah, why can't AI do it? It's almost like that silver bullet, and I think that's also part of the hype. But AI is here to stay. I'm comparing it with the time, with the rise of the internet, with the rise of the smartphones. And to your point, from the steam machines to electricity, it is here to stay. But at the same time, there is also the big misunderstanding or a hype around the expectations. And I think one of the best examples, and I actually really like what they did, is what IKEA has done. So they understood what their employees are good at. They have invested in trainings, and actually they haven't fired anyone. But the
And
customer satisfaction that they have accomplished and what they're able to do with it. So that is really, I always take it as a good example and a prime example of how humans and AI work together.
I used it yesterday for this is your approach. You have to redefine which tasks can be done by AI which are resolved and which questions are unresolved, and then let people do it. And you see the customer satisfaction grew. They had like 1.3 billion extra turnover on year. And of course, the customer journey only improved. But this is if you do it thoroughly. If you go from the organization, you look at your processes, you look at the issues, the problems, not saying we're going to resolve it with AI, but see how it can resolve something for you. So not starting from a technology, but actually your business challenges.
And that's the key thing. And even though I'm a techie and I'm tech in heart and I own the tech pillar, it's business and the case is what is driving it. You know, tech is more in a supporting role for the business, because I usually say you can build the best feature in the world with all the best practices and coding standards, but if no one is using it, it's the worst feature ever built. So you have to build something that people actually want to use. But I think that what is for me very striking in a key example is that's kind of what we discussed at the beginning of this conversation. It's about the experience and critical thinking, because these are the edge cases. It's understanding what the customer who is asking you, which is sitting somewhere else, actually wants to do, and to streamline that problem. That you need to have the critical thinking. You need to have that level of creativity. That's something that you can't just delegate, because if we delegate the critical thinking, then what's left?
This is really my biggest concern, Una, seriously. So when you look at the current world, I think that a lot of the world, given the fact that what is going on online already is like repeating the things that people don't understand. That's the theory of stupidity. Is like not that you're stupid, but you're just repeating what somebody else said, not having the critical thinking, saying, "But this is not right. I have to turn on my thinking." That we have so much slop. We live in a post-truth era where, misinformation and disinformation intentionally is placed on internet overall. And if we're feeding it into the models, these models will also have not even hallucination, but they will have the data that's not correct. And if you do not check it, and then we come to back to what you said,
Yeah.
like you have to have the knowledge and expertise to see, hey, this answer is not correct, and then go back and see what's going on. If we extrapolate it in the speed that it's going on and the adoption rates for the common people, not even organization, I think it's a very big risk, a threat to our way of thinking. If you even see that educational instances are saying, yeah, we're going to adopt AI, while Norway, I think, is doing quite a good thing. They said, well, we're not going to do it. For the young children, especially not. We can use it gradually, but first you're going to learn to write with a pen and pencil.
Yeah, I think it's also happening here. I'm seeing the kind of the revert of going from you have a tablet to actually do your homework and the studies to going back to pen and paper, because there has been a research and to your point, kind of that cognitive decline. And I think the schools are now understanding more and more the impact that it has. But unfortunately, we need to go through certain generations to actually understand what happens when you give away the technology at such a young age. There was quite an interesting metric, and I will need to look it up exactly where it was. But you see the AI usage, and I see, because we're in this field, we're in this really digital field. But if you see it on a global level, it's not that big percentage of the people that actually does use AI and has access to AI, or even has a subscription. So then it's kind of sometimes I have a feeling like we're in our own bubble because everyone around us is using it. And then you take a step back, I don't know, go to one of the villages in any of the countries and ask how many of those people are using it. I mean, not saying that if you're in the village, you're not using it, but I think that we have a perception that it's far higher than it is. And yes, it will go higher as the time is progressing. But how to resolve, the fake news, the fake data? I think I have even seen something along the lines, make AI stupid, kind of a movement, kind of deliberately to feed it the wrong information so that the models that get trained don't have the right data. And this is again where the critical thinking will come in. And I think we as a society, we simply need to spend time more with humans and actually regain those connections. Because even if you look at it from the social networks perspective, it didn't create connections. It created more loneliness as
Yeah.
well at the same time. And it starts from home. And I mean, it's super difficult. You have long working hours, you have business travels, you have the kindergartens, but you have to find the time. You have to find the way, how to talk with people, how to go out and how to rebuild things. And yes, I feel like I'm from the dinosaur era when we went to concerts, we were just jumping, and now everyone is holding their phones and recording. It's a completely different era to show that they have been there. But we need to go back more to physical world, and then to focus on building that creativity and the critical thinking and lots of books readings, I would say.
Yeah, I agree totally. I think I wrote a Substack article 2-3 days ago. The golden cage, like we are not connected, we are coupled. Like
I really like the analogy. I think that's a really good one.
so I think that's we have a feeling, and this is actually creating loneliness, desperation, etc., dopamine, etc. And it all comes from when you're in a conversation. It's really interesting. If you're sitting at a table, you have a conversation, nobody's touching the phone. If you really have few topics that you're discussing, of course you will have one or two people that are like, okay, I'm that addicted. Um, but most people, when you interact and you ask questions and you really have a genuine conversation, it disappears. The technology disappears totally. So actually, we're curing something that it was forcefully created on us. Of course, they're using loopholes in our brain to make us addicted. But I think the resolution is very, very easy. It's just having a genuine conversation with somebody. And if everybody does that, it will resolve a lot of things.
It definitely will. And I also mentioned the open models coming out. I think that will create a certain competition as well on this front. And I expect to see a bunch of startups and unicorns in the governance space in particular. And I think that it's in our nature. We need to make lots of mistakes to learn something. But as long as we learn, it's good. So yes, we're going to see a bit of a chaos coming our way, but I think in the long run, it will filter itself out. And yes, it's very dangerous. If you see with the voice cloning, in particular, what's happening. If you see the AI generated videos, there are many things that can go and are going wrong. But one point that we haven't really caught up, and I really don't want to enter into the role of politics now, but our legislations and legal hasn't caught up with technology as to how these things are handled. And that's a big gap. It's how do you enforce accountability? That just because your username on the screen, that you can't do certain things. And when I say certain things, I'm thinking, harassment, faking someone's identity, and these type of things. And even if you look at it from, the smearing campaigns, and you don't need an AI for that or anything like that. I mean, that has happened already previously. And I remember someone described it as whack-a-mole. Kind of, you remove one, the other one shows up.
Yeah, I think it's happening. So because we are living in a post-true era, you can say anything, even if it's not true. Either it becomes true, or by the time you figure it out and start saying, "Hey, it's not true," it already starts to live its own life online. And it's you can destroy images or figures, and especially in a public era, it's terrible. And I think that legislation is taking too long because the people involved in the legislation are not really technical; they are legislative. So they come from how we're going to apply this for example, for whole Europe. So tempering it and slowing it down, I think it's a good thing. But on the other side, we are open. I mean, we're hunted ducks. Everybody can use all the data from the Netherlands or whatever, because we accepted the terms and agreements. We're using Meta. We're using whatever platform, LinkedIn for that matter. And now we're concerned, like 2 decades after, like, hey, what did we do? And now you get the AI on top of
Yeah.
it. I mean, it's a
Yeah, I
call.
mean, in particular on LinkedIn, what I'm finding it a bit hilarious is I think there was an article recently that they want to combat AI generated articles. But at the same time, if you have premium account as I do, the first thing that it offers me is use our AI to generate your content. So how will you actually tackle that? Who gets then the priority if this is kind of what you're offering? But one thing that I'm actually finding quite interesting from the usefulness perspective, I have a habit to read X a lot and to see what's going on. And I'm seeing that people use Grok to fact check things, and it's quite good. Uh, but even that awareness, so they're not sure, and people will massively tag Grok. But that thing already went viral. But you will always see, even if it went viral, that there is a subtext and actually explaining the things. Something like that is a step in a good direction to combat the fact that everyone can write anything.
And too many people however, I coming back to LinkedIn, I call it Linstagram nowadays, because there is no
Yeah, it
business
is.
information there. It's like empathetic videos, like, oh, look at me saving this sorry animal. I mean, it's a good thing, but or posting photographs, or I mean, it's like, where is the essence of the business oriented or knowledge sharing, etc. So I moved to Substack. It seems much.
I'll take a look into it as well. Well, I can tell you that for LinkedIn, I actually created my own feed through Claude, basically to cluster and filter who I should follow and read. So I actually don't even open LinkedIn. I open my dashboard. But LinkedIn is quite difficult because you can't use the APIs, etc. So I have to use the Chrome built-in tool, which is not ideal. It's too slow for what you need, but if you look at the feed, it's not ideal. I also get content that it's clearly AI generated, and you can recognize it so easy. It's this, not that.
Exactly.
You know,
It's all
in
the
the ever
same.
evolving, yeah, there's so many, and to be honest, I just click X when I see something like that. I don't really think that it's learning anything from it, but it has become a bit better lately. But I have also noticed that people I follow, I would miss out on what they have posted, and it would take 2 weeks before it shows up in my feed. And then, yeah, why didn't it show up when it was actually needed and it was posted? So, yeah, we do have, it's a battle of the algorithm, battle of what actually gets served, because at the end of the day, what do all these platforms want? They want you using it. So, and this also shows how we as humans interact. Some, you have that term, doom scrolling. When you kind of sit in the evening and you just go and scroll, 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 and we have attention span of about 2 seconds. So you want to catch someone's attention in those 2 seconds. You want them to click. So if they see the high click rate or the high comment or reaction, that's why they're going to serve you, because you will be longer there. I mean, it all makes sense. It's all logical, and also from the algorithmical point of view, but it also tells us a bit on what we react as humans.
Yeah, they are really using our loopholes in the brain and this the weak spots and etc. Um, and then coming back, it's not governed, and when it's not governed, then they will use it, because these understandings are not present by the people that are writing the legislation.
Absolutely, but we also touch a very sensitive topic. It's kind of, in my view, you can't expect governments to do everything for you, because if they do, then you have offloaded the critical thinking to them at the same time. Uh, but kind of what is that boundary? What is that line to which
I would say,
the
do your job. I mean, you were elected. Do your job. No, I mean, I know it's too easy. I know it's too
yeah,
easy.
yeah, it's too simple.
Yeah, it's too simple. But then again, if you do not know something, then you hire people or go to your peers, or you get people, you get people around you that can actually support you in understanding something, right?
Yeah, and I don't know, have you read it, but there was quite recently a very good research written, like a story, the year of 2031. I don't know, have you read that one? It's a really interesting angle supported by the scientists and the people in the field as to what will happen if Europe doesn't start paying attention and investing in removing some of the barriers that are there. It provides a different view from the doom and gloom that we're continuously seeing, but it's a doom and gloom from a bit of a different perspective. But unlike others, it provides solution. And always, the solution is somewhere in the middle. And yeah, it's an interesting times that we're living in.
Yeah, I have a feeling that we're just started. So
We
that
have.
this is like the dot-com bubble that will burst. However, the technology that is developed will come to its maturity 10 years after. So that we are just seeing all different innovations and stuff, and we haven't figured out how we're going to deal with it as a society, as individuals, as companies. Some have, and they're making progress quite rapidly. But like for the whole society or the whole world to experience the leverage of this, that's we're like a decade away. Maybe
Oh,
I'm
for the whole, yeah, absolutely. But in terms of what the technology can do, I think it will happen much sooner than we think. I don't think it will take 10 years. I think it will be far less. Because if I look what AI models can do today compared to last year, it's super impressive. And when I see how my developers are using it, how they're coding, how they're thinking, what we're building around it, I think it's going to be much, much faster. And some parts are already there.
Yeah, but most definitely. And bring me to the next question for you. This is maybe a broad one, but to make this practical. So imagine a CEO, a CTO, CIO, and a CDO. Privacy board or board member is listening to this, and they know that AI is important, and they know blocking everything is unrealistic. So they need to have the controlled adoption and not uncontrolled. So what would your advice be? What should they do in the next 90 days?
First is the identification of the case that they want to use it for to identify the tool. Then look everything from the legislation perspective and the regulations where the data lives for what your data will be used. So this is more from the purchasing option. I wouldn't do a big bang. I would identify a team to treat it as a pilot phase. And I would use that team to build the foundations around it. So in parallel, I would spend two teams, one to actually adopt it, one to adapt it. And that basically means dealing with the security, dealing with the observability, to understand actually how they're using it and what is happening. Because one thing that will tell you is what are the cases in which you need to invest? Because you have good people, but what are the things that they're missing to use that AI to their utmost advantage, and where that AI, has it helped them or has it actually created far more work for them? Because that can also happen at the same time. And only after the pilot, I would switch to the next team. And once I get a good traction, because you also want to get the buy-in from your employees, you're not going to do the big bang. Because then it becomes easier to adopt it. If you do a big bang, everyone must use it, but they don't see the point or the tool is not the right fit for them. So you're just burning money. But what have you actually done with it? If you don't know what the AI has done for you and you're only looking at kind of the token usage, I don't know, you can have an employee spend hundreds of thousands of tokens. Is that your best employee? That's the wrong metric to look. And I think that's the key thing when it comes to the AI. Understand what it actually did and how it was used.
Okay, and then because we started with that, what are the questions leaders should ask about AI and privacy when they're in this process?
Is the model being trained? Where the data will live? Because those are kind of your basic ones, especially when we talk about from the GDPR perspective. But in particular is when you look at the employees who need to upload a certain data, how do you obfuscate the PI data, define the PI data, set up all those boundaries that need to be around it? And another question is, what is the level of hallucinations and drift that the outputs have produced? So somebody needs to take care of that. Otherwise, we're back to happy flows.
Okay. Just thinking if I'm missing something here. What would be your concerns here? What would be the obstacles?
Obstacles, it's human resistance, budget resistance. This is usually what you get because, there is no leprechaun with a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. So you need to be conscious of what you're doing it. I usually my approach and everything is I'm very data based, very analytical in thinking. And I like to have the data for everything that I'm doing, the team is doing, the measurable things, from the quality, from the security, observability perspective. It's the core, going back to the core principles of engineering. And I apply exactly the same when it comes to the AI. But now with the business, you need to tie that into the financial aspect as well, and with the additional levels of the security that you need to encompass around it. But, to your point, it's expectations. I think expectations is the biggest obstacle, is the lack of understanding what you need to do to get things going, and expect that everything is, I press a button and AI will do that for me. That's not the way how the real thing works. Otherwise, you're back into vibe coding.
Do we have still the mandatory things that are necessary to apply? Like you have to have your data in order. Of course, legacy technology, on which we encounter a lot in corporate world, absence of process descriptions, documentation, and governance on top of that. Are these mandatory to start?
Well, it's the best to have them. I mean, it makes your start
It's a
much
dream.
easier. But I think, AI will force you, in order to get the output that you actually want and desire. It will force you to clean up your mess. But actually, at the same time, we have rolled out AI delivery model. So we're reshaping how we do things from the standard delivery model that we have had. But AI is forcing you to change things, but also to look things under the hood as to what are the processes that are no longer relevant? What are the new processes that you need to add? How do you tackle them? How do you tackle the data? And I mean, the famous garbage in, garbage out, the same rules apply. I mean, machine only learns what you give it. And if you give it the wrong things, it's not then the machine that it's at fault. You gave it the wrong things. And then it's all about interpretation of the data and what has outputted it. I would say use AI to clean up things with the right people for the right job. Don't just give it to AI. But it's these are the things that haven't changed for the last 20 years. No one wants to deal with a cleanup.
That's one of my concerns. I started my career when big data was a thing, and when you enter the organization, they haven't learned anything from that era, and that's like 16, 17 years ago. Um, so I'm quite wondering how will we look back to this era in 10 years time.
Yeah, I would say really use it to start cleaning up. And when it comes to the old legacy systems, AI can help you in explaining you, and at least start with documenting things. Start identifying which part of the systems can be improved. Again, do it with a person who actually knows that system or has worked on that system. Don't just throw it over the fence, but there are ways how AI can help you with this. But if the expectation is that it's a magical solution, it's not.
Well, it's not a silver bullet as you said it previously.
Yeah, it's definitely not. And the if you look at the clients, the organizations, there's so much data. There's so much data that has been aggregated. And to your point, even if you ask, what have we learned from that data? Then the question is, do you really need that data?
Yeah. And then you come across the compliance that said, well, you cannot have that data to do anything.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah, and there are ways how to go about this, but it all starts with what is the case you want to resolve? What is your use case? Is it a business case? Is it a client case? Is it a customer case? What is that one thing that you actually want to tackle? And start from there, because that is your fastest way to see the famous ROI. That will tell you more than anything else.
I think that's a great tip. Una, I want to end with a more reflective question. So if we continue like this, imagine that
it can take forever.
we uh, uh, with AI everywhere, convenience everywhere, invincible data flows everywhere, and we governance behind the scenes. What are you most worried about? And on our side, maybe also to have a light. What gives you hope?
Should we start first with the negative or with the positive? I mean, what really concerns me and is the fakeness behind it and how that can be used. When I think of let's take an example. So this is a podcast. It's recorded. You can actually use my voice for something. Will that be used for something? I have no idea. I want to believe that, people don't think that way, but we see that it does. We have seen that, parents, grandparents getting the phone calls. That one, when it touches your personal life, that's the one which actually concerns me tremendously. Anything that impacts the family or can impact the family when the technology is in use. And I know that, we're very focused on the business, but I'm also looking a lot at the personal impact that it can have. And especially, on the children who are treating it as a friend, where they get the advices. And we have seen, unfortunately, some horrible news that came out with it several months ago. That is where I have the concern. And I know it should be, we have been talking a lot about the business, but my concern is more on the private side, because business will figure it out. It can absorb things. It's not ideal, but business is more equipped to handle these things. On the positive side, I'm seeing younger generations being more critical. I think more critical than my generation, maybe your generation was. I mean, we kind of grew up in between, or we're kind of that bridge between the worlds. But I'm seeing younger generations really question things, and things that we have even taken, just accepted as the way of life. They don't. So I think that we don't give them the credit that they deserve, because we like to say they had it easier. Not really. They grew up, in different environments, and every generation has a different thing. But they're the next ones to build the future. After, in a decade or so, it's going to be on them. And they're far more critical than we are. At least that's what I'm seeing based on the surroundings, and both from a personal and professional life. And that's actually something you do need, kind of question everything.
Yeah, definitely. They're much more critical, and I would say that they much more like life, not behind the screen,
Yes.
life, outside, and that's very hopeful and inspiring. That they're saying, well, I don't want to have a job that I'm looking 8 hours a day at the screen. I want to do something else. So that's really promising, I would say. And their objective. So I'm very hopeful of the future, even though we have this, but it will mental it out. However, I am concerned, as you are, for the youth that considers AI their friend. That says something about the social system in the community. So we have a lot to do, which is a good thing.
We have a lot to do, and we do have a lot of things to clean up.
Yeah, most definitely. Una, thank you for joining AI Almanac. To everyone listening, when you're using AI, the question is not how you use it, but the question is whether you understand what deal you're making and how you're selling your soul to it. I'm just exaggerating. This was AI Almanac. Until next time, stay curious, stay critical, and please stop uploading your entire organizational memory into a random tool because the button looked friendly. Thank you, and until the next time.
Bye.